We're talking about all the evil. We are back. All right, so I know that we are touching on a few of the episodes here and talking about the Demon Howard. And that one actually ends up being a fairly interesting episode because it shows how assessors can work together from region to region. Mm-hmm. So
that is interesting. So interesting.
Yeah, and that is true. That is true. When you have different miracles and different possessions and stuff like that, they will bring various assessors in to go over these, as we previously discussed. So this episode is not wrong in that approach.
Okay. Well, like you said, it seems like I said, I have not seen a single episode of this yet, so I'm just kind of listening to you guys and your takes, but it seems like they really have done their homework in presenting some of these cases and presenting some of these viewpoints and stuff like that. Like, they're just not making stuff up on the go. Like, there's been homework done, and they're trying to, from each of these situations, provide something that's real to life.
Yes, absolutely.
Kudos for that.
Yeah, and that episode is really good at highlighting some of those points.
So is that a Dominion thing?
Not really. It's more like think of it as a corporation. It's kind of like a department.
Because I know, we've talked about this on the show before, that certain fallen angels have certain dominions over certain regions.
Right.
So I didn't know if that was like the Catholic Church's like mirroring kind of. Have certain dominion over certain areas, or
now think of it more like, again, like a department. Now there are regions where certain people are more in charge of different areas, because like every parish is actually technically autocephalous. Every bishop over each region is autocephalous to that region. In his parishes.
Okay.
He operates as the manager of his area. Each bishop does. And the priests operate, think of them as officers under the sheriff, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it works. If we were to use a secular example, the bishop would be the sheriff, and then each priest would be one of his deputies.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like Barney Fife.
Yeah. There's a few of those out there.
Got his one bullet in the pocket. I love it. What I love about the Catholic Church's approach about that, though, because we have been trying, and I still think we plan on doing, to get an exorcist on the show.
We are working on it now.
Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
You have to track them down. You really have to do your homework and investigate who they are in your region or in whatever region you may be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure they're legit.
It's not a very publicized thing.
It's not like you can look it up in the phone book.
So is exorcism a mainly solely Catholic thing, or do other religions do it?
Protestant I think we'd call it deliverance on our side.
Yes.
Different terminology.
Yeah. We actually have a friend of the show who engages in a Protestant version of like house cleanings and spiritual cleanliness and stuff like that.
That's a great episode, Doug.
Yeah. Very open-minded. Yeah,
Doug Overmeyer.
Yeah, Doug Overmeyer. Yep. Very open-minded guy. He enjoys working with both Protestants and Catholics. He's very open-minded in his approach. Like half his family is Catholic, half is Protestant, and he's happy being in between. So
and he was skeptical going into it.
Mm-hmm.
Very skeptical. He went on one of the cleanings of a home because they just needed an extra person or something like that. I can't remember quite exactly why he went on, but he went on, and he was a believer after that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and he has a good book out there too. Just look up Douglas Overmeyer. He has a really good book out there.
Clean House.
Yep. I forget the name of the book offhand, but yeah, just look his name up on Amazon. It'll pull up.
Yep. Our episode was called A Clean House or something.
Yes, it was. Yep.
Yep.
So go back. The links are actually in that episode.
It was interesting because he talked about the spirits being attached to certain objects in the house.
Yeah.
And they would go through the house, they'd pray over it, and they discover like you have to get rid of this object, and they'd find out what it was, and they'd get rid of it, and
not Grandma's ashes.
Jeez Louise!
It was the one time the one story he told Grandma's ashes. it was like a lamp or some kind of
Well, I think wasn't there like a ring in the lamp?
Yeah, so it just looked like a lamp, and then they turned it over, and like, this is just a lamp. They turned it over, then they opened it from the bottom, and there was something in there
Yeah.
that was, I don't know if it was
Just
like
pagan.
satanic or something.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It had something, but whatever it was a gateway for like the spiritual world.
Yeah.
And ever since the point when they bought it and they brought it into their home, they've just been noticing weird things happening in the house.
Yeah.
So it was that kind of deal.
Yeah, no, it is historical that, whether it's objects or actual physical locations, you can get spirits, demonic, type stuff, or even heavenly
Mhm.
stuff tied to that stuff. Interesting to figure out, the science, or not into science so much, but to figure out why and how that happened. It's always been, something in the back of my mind. I know my parents, when I was younger, when they would buy a house, or friends of theirs would buy a house, they would do not so much of a house clean, but like they call it a house blessing.
Mhm.
They'd go in, they pray over the new house, pray over the location, pray over the family that was moving in, anoint the windows and doors with oil and stuff like that. So it's definitely something of, like not so much of a looking for something, but a thing of, there's something new coming in, and we want to bless this, and we want to, make it good.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Ed, I haven't been on a show with you until today. Do you believe in demonic possessions and ghosts, all that jazz?
Another hot seat question. Thank you very much for that, Sam.
You got 20 seconds to go.
Yes. In a short answer, yes, I do. I do believe in demonic possessions. I believe that it is an actual thing that can happen. Ghosts are a little more complicated.
Mhm.
Personally, like, I have never had an experience with something like that. From my background and my upbringing, I believe that when somebody dies, you're either you're before God, and then you're in judgment, and you're going either to heaven or hell. That's my personal belief as of right now. In the stuff I've been,
So final judgment.
yeah. So if you're seeing the ghost, quote unquote, of someone, I actually think you're more seeing a personification of a demon, of a demonic thing.
All right.
Like I said, it's always something that, because you hear of other stories, in the Bible, you hear of stories of, because like on the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus appeared and there was two people that were dead that appeared down there with them.
Yep.
So even biblically, it can happen. I've heard stories, from friends and stuff, where somebody in their family died. They were really distraught over it because it was a sudden thing. They didn't get a chance to say goodbye, and they appeared, and for whether it was they were awake when it happened. So I don't want to say a dream, but like they appeared before them, for like 15 seconds just to say, "Hey,
Yep.
I love you." They got to say their goodbye and type of thing. So like, I don't know. Like, it's an interesting topic, and who knows if we'll ever have the clear answer. Like the Bible says, we see the world through cloudy glasses.
I had one of my friends actually had their fathers appear to them after he passed away, and he was going through a hard time. He had lost his father, but he said his father came to him one night and said, "Stop worrying about me. I'm okay now. I'm at peace."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That is a pretty common one, I think, for people who lose their father, because I've had that one after my father passed, and
And they touch upon that in season 2.
ba-dum-bum-bum.
nice segue there.
Well, it's interesting you say that because in one of the episodes, Two Fathers, David and Kristen visit David's estranged father, Leon. David learns that his dad has now remarried and is using the mark. What mark? Oh, it's one of the sigils. The demon sigils were discovered in the previous episode. And they're trying to figure out what the demon sigils are, just to give you a background. And one of those demon sigils they found to be on his father's artwork at the end of the previous episode. Okay, so claiming that it was given him clarity he didn't have before, Ben meets Vanessa for the first time in 3 weeks and confronts her for not calling back. She explains that her sister, quote unquote, who inhabits the right side of her body, didn't want them to get together despite some initial concerns. He decides to continue their relationship. David and Kristen both consume hallucinogenic drugs, causing them to have visions. Kristen witnesses Leon's wife give birth to a ghoul. For those who are not out there, ghouls are kind of like a cross between a demon and a goblin. While David meets Annie Commerce, who would, just a little bit of background, Annie Commerce is somebody who supposedly had died back during the slaving times, and she had been a slave of the plantation owner who had then died when she was still fairly young, I believe in her early 20s. Who Leon explains is a slave ancestor of theirs who died in 1859. The mark turns out to be the brand of the slave owner who purchased Annie, which Leon rediscovered and chose to reclaim as his own. David is shocked by his father's decision, but accepts that he is allowed to deal with the pain of their family's history in his own way. David drives Kristen home to find that her husband, Andy, has finally returned.
Slacker.
Okay.
So just a background, by the way, I don't think we mentioned this previously.
We didn't, yeah.
So Kristen and her husband, Andy, are mountain climbers. And that was their previous career together, was guiding people on mountain excursions. Thank you. Excursions. Journeys, and they were their guides. So, and he returns from, I believe it was the Himalayas, if I recall right. I think he was in the Himalayas, which is where the Buddhism comes in later.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
we kind of skipped over a little bit of this. We didn't talk about Vanessa at all until now, and
well, she doesn't really play heavily, I think, until the next episode, right? It's 1 or 2 episodes from now when she confronts her. Yeah. Because up until this point, they had 1 or 2 like kind of like island episodes that kind of sitting on their own.
I thought this was the episode where he does the show with Vanessa.
Show with Vanessa.
The ghost hunting?
Hold on.
Yeah, the ghost hunting.
No, that was
That was a couple
previous
episodes before?
episode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't touch on that at all.
Well, let's touch on it then. So, in a previous episode, Ben had appeared on a ghost hunter show. That was a good episode, by the way.
It was.
So, and I love it because right from the get-go, it starts with him saying, "Yeah, I don't believe any of this crap."
Yeah. And he dismantled everything they were trying to do live.
Right from the start.
Science can explain everything.
And Vanessa is the one of the cast members of the show, and she doesn't believe in most of it, but she does believe that her right side is possessed by her twin sister that died in birth.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's fascinating because there actually is accounts of that. In fact, there's a really weird account of a twin. She was a conjoined twin. Earlier, now, and the other head of the conjoined twin couldn't talk, but she kept saying it would whisper to her at night, telling her how she's going to kill her. So it was a really, really weird.
That is not cool.
Yeah, really, really weird true life tale of somebody who was haunted by their twin, who couldn't talk except to her.
It reminds me of that one guy in like 1400s or 1500s that had the Murdoch or something like that, Murdrake, that had his brother's head on the back of his head.
Yep.
That would just tell him to kill himself all the time.
That was it's a very similar story.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But also just like with phantom limbs, with donors, like you get the same. There have been many stories about getting like those cravings that the donor that you got that organ from, that you get those same cravings that they do. You get, you start acting the same way that they do in some ways. You start having some, like able to play on the keyboard when you've never been able to before.
Science actually backs a lot of that up, though, because they do say that every cell of your body contains a complete library of your whole life.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. There's some theories out there that state that your consciousness itself is only received by your body and that it sits outside of your body, and every cell of your body actually receives the entire library of your consciousness.
Oh, man, I have not had enough alcohol. Yoda.
and these are actual legitimate peer-reviewed studies.
Mhm.
We're not talking about fringe science. Like, well, maybe it's a little bit fringe, but but it is peer-reviewed though. It is peer-reviewed science.
Now we're talking my language.
So it might be a little bit on the fringe side, but it is peer-reviewed science. And
9 out of 10 doctors recommend this.
and there is we can go over this later because I have gone over some real studies in this field where they'll put somebody inside of like an MRI machine, right? And they will tell them they're going to perform a test on them, but 5 seconds before they tell them, that part of the brain activates and knows they're going to say that.
Yep.
So it's fast. So it does appear that the consciousness outside of the body sometimes is aware that something is going to take place.
It's the energy around it.
Yeah, so it does make you wonder. Nikolai Tesla previously had actually said that his brain was only the receptacle for his consciousness and it would receive its information. So it does beg these questions.
But to segue back real quick, Ben had this relationship with her and he was struggling with this mentality of just, this is a normal girl. She's really beautiful. She's really hot is what he said.
Right.
But just a normal person, except for that one thing. and he struggled with that mentality, and that really gave the groundwork of like who he was in the show. Of he needs everything explained, he needs everything to make sense.
Yep.
And if it doesn't make sense, then he has to argue about it. He has to whittle it down until it does make sense. And it was just character progression for him in the sense that, all right, I need to go beyond my comfort zone if I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
And he ended up making out with...
Hey, that's season 2, mister.
Was it?
Shh.
With who?
We're only talking about season 1.
Dang.
To be revealed at a later date.
More to follow.
After Ed watches the show.
Someone who looks like a certain person.
But that knowledge leads into this episode because Ben does experience her confessing these things to him. So it's very interesting. And the fact that Kristen, through hallucinogens, does end up seeing some of these weird things happening. And then to his credit, maybe this is why he's trying to experience visions this way, but he does end up seeing one of the ancestors that were there previously on that plantation that was one of their relatives.
That. Yeah.
Which alludes to, did he actually see God in his original vision? Because if he's, it's referencing or alluding or whatever you want to call it, that if he's using drugs in order to see something, then in this instance, it is a pagan religion for what he is, which is Catholic.
Yeah.
So having this Africana sort of voodoo type belief and having that kind of vision, it shows that in the show, there are many different ways to figure out the visions that you need to explain to yourself.
Agreed. And I will say there's some interplay there because they seem to indicate that his first vision was not induced by anything.
Correct.
And that his following visions he's having, which are induced, could or could not be real visions.
Which is a kind of corruption of himself in order to achieve what he wants to achieve.
Right.
But also in that episode is kind of the corruption of the main character, Kristen, with and Ben, I suppose, of that sexual tension that they have between themselves.
I didn't even notice it. I didn't even pick up on it.
Oh, really? It was kind of prevalent, my man. But I mean, throughout the entire show, up until then, Ben has been, Ben and Kristen have been struggling with this sexual tension that have been being pushed by the demonic presences that they both are dealing with. Ben with Leland and Kristen with George.
Right.
So they both came to a forefront, and it was at that instance that Andy came home, Kristen's husband, and that I think is absolutely very important, because with Andy, I think it shows the importance of a father figure, a man figure in the household.
Okay.
That he is a protector, he is the masculine influence. So when she gets home and she realizes that he is home, something changed in her. And she does it she acts it very well in the show. That she changes in the sense of, all right, he's home now. Oh my gosh, what have I been doing? Now, she still has that corruption in her mind, and she still struggles with that. But I just love that when he comes home, I'm not sure if it was in the next, it was in the next episode. I'm not sure if we're going to touch on it or not, but the fact that he is a protector of the household.
Okay.
Yeah. So the obvious thing would be to do is, the next time they have sex is wear wolf masks or whatever masks they use.
That was that season 2? I can't remember.
No, that was the first one. I remember that.
That was it gets hairy.
That was weird.
Wait, hold on. No, that hold on. I remember. I think that's either the end of season. And that's near the end of season 1.
Yeah.
But
the end of season 1.
Before we took our break, we were about to touch upon Sebastian Lewis, which was the teenage male that was being indoctrinated by Leland.
Yes.
And I thought it was the perfect balance between those two types of masculinity, features, if you will. I don't know. The influence. There you go. Influences. With Andy Bouchard, it was the man of the household. It was the protector. When it came to Sebastian, it was the simp. The Hollywood's interpretation of the far right.
Okay.
And so it was a corrupting influence versus a protector. And I think they found that perfect balance of explaining the importance of having that perfect manliness in the household.
That's good.
Going deep.
Yeah, that's good. And
I think wait till I get to the therapist.
I think anybody in the church will actually admit there's a war on family ideas and family archetypes and
absolutely
the atomic family.
Yeah, because if you destroy the family, you destroy the foundation of what it means to be in a human society.
Mm-hmm.
So
anything goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Good.
I remember feeling that too when the husband came home. I felt relieved. I'm like, all right, someone could put these kids to bed now.
Well, not only that, but if you remember the next episode, he puts on the VR goggles and he takes care of that demon.
Yes.
And that is what really just signified to me that it was because he was away. The man was away from the family. That all this evil was able to come in. And it just really resonated to me, the importance of having both members, both familial figures in the household.
Yeah, both the archetypes of the family.
Yes.
Yeah. The patriarch and the matriarch.
Yes. and they complement each other so well. It's not one over the other. It's absolutely complementary.
Yeah.
Where one is not able to, the other one does. And that goes both ways.
Yeah.
And they show the tension really well because she was not necessarily happy about him being there.
Correct. And that was the corrupting influence.
Right. So she tried to pretend as if to make it seem to him that she was happy, but she
Right.
was not that happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what to do with all her feelings and all of that.
Yeah. So those were some very key parts, especially about mid-season. All of those things came to play.
Yeah.
And the reason why we played a certain song at the beginning of the episode is because of episode number 7.
My favorite episode.
So, a Catholic schoolgirl reports instances of students singing a repetitive melody non-stop. Kristen and Ben discover that the melody comes from an internet cartoon about marijuana, and that all of the affected students heard it through a video posted by a popular influencer, Melendaz. Lexi asks Cheryl for advice on dealing with a bully. So, what did you think about this episode?
Ah, man, it was fantastic.
Tell us how you really feel.
Like, it just shows the literal influence that influencers have on our children.
Right.
I don't even have children, and it scares me up the wazoo, just the effect that all these people on the internet have. And I don't know. There are no words to explain how deep and how sinister all this music, all these influences can be on children. I mean,
I agree. No, I 100% agree. And I don't blame the influencer because I believe the influencer is also a victim of what they're being told they have to put out there. In most instances, not all, but
so just like Sebastian, this was the opposite. This was the other side of it.
Yeah.
Sebastian was being, influenced by Leland.
Yep.
But the influencer was also got that song from Leland as well.
Exactly. You find out later that this same person, Melendaz, puts this song out and is in the background, she's playing this song because Leland's the one even guiding her as an influencer.
And telling her how to get out of it.
Yep.
He's so evil, that guy.
Such a good actor.
But
No, he really is.
I do agree with you in terms of the influence over, our youth, especially in what it means today in our society and in our culture.
Yeah.
It's a tough job as parents because it's so ingrained in our society. We know it's not going away.
Right.
It's always going to be a part of our world. But without that presence of at least one parent in the house, at least one who's present with their children, 2 would be better. But if at least not one, that's who's raising your kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It is so important. Like I said, I haven't seen any of these episodes, but I can speak to this. It is so important nowadays for parents or parent, legal guardian, whatever, to really be paying attention to what the kids are watching, what they're taking in. Because it is so easy for a kid to start out on something so innocent. And I have 6 nieces. I don't have any kids of my own, but I have 6 nieces. We've had a couple occurrences, in the family and stuff to where they'll be sitting down with their tablet, they'll just get on YouTube and watch, start watching something good and innocent and stuff like that. But you start hitting those links and you start going places, and all of a sudden they're asking you a question. Hey, I saw this or I heard this on, whatever. And you're like, where in the world did you get that information? So it's not, you're not, how do I want to put this? You're not invading your kids' privacy. You're protecting them. You are, in this day and age, like in the day and age of the internet, where you have access to, I love technology. I've always been a tech person since I was a little kid. I think technology is so cool. But like to something we said earlier, technology is a neutral thing, and people can use it for good and for evil. And it's made a very open pathway for either one of those instances to be used and to be opened up to kids, to adults, to everybody.
Yeah.
And so if you're not gatekeeping, if you're not watching, if you're not listening to, going in and seeing what they're listening to, what they're watching, and viewing the stuff for yourself and seeing, does it align with what I want? my child, my kid to be learning and to be growing up and be influenced, because like the term influence is a real thing.
Oh yeah.
Like, especially when they're kids, like this influences how they think, how they perceive the world, how they act.
Yes.
You know, so like you really got to be paying attention nowadays.
Absolutely.
Which, not to be too political, because this is not the show for it, but please pay attention to what your schools are teaching your kids. It is so important. Like, what's going on in Florida is complete misinformation. Please pay attention to what your schools are telling your kids, and be active. Be active in your school systems. Please vote correctly.
So you're saying that people are not retiring and going to Florida?
I'm saying what's going on in Florida politically when it comes to the school bills is of utmost importance, and there's so much misinformation about it.
All right. Cool.
But
we'll cover more of that on Bible Over Brews.
I was about to say that's politics.
But Ed, I mean, I really agree with what you're saying, and I think that really was that show really, this episode in particular, really.
Oh my Lord!
Simplified that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'll say just one little caveat onto that is I think it's also just as important not only to watch what your kids are bringing in, but on the internet what they are putting out.
Yes.
Like I there's a number of influencers I watch on Twitch or on YouTube. I like their videos. I like their content and stuff like that. And when you get into the comments of some of these channels and you see what people are willing to put out there, because they can sit behind a keyboard, behind a name that will never become public, you know, and stuff like that. And just how they interact with people, like you know 100% there's no way they would say or do this if they were in front of somebody. You know, but it goes to show, you know, you need parental supervision. You know, go in and look at what your kid has been posting. Go in and look at how they're interacting with people, because that's very, very important. Because it's so easy, you know, because on the internet, like there are very little consequences. So like if somebody really makes you mad and you know you decide to lash out, there's not a consequence. Where if you did that in real life, that person could hit you or your parents could hear you. You know, you can get disciplined for it, that kind of stuff. So like just pay attention, because like
So true.
It's so easy to take that next step that you wouldn't do IRL. Thank you, Twitch.
And parents, there's options out there. So like I use the Orbi system from Netgear at my house. It has beautiful parental controls. All my kids know that I 100% control the entire network, and they're not allowed to see things they're not supposed to see. You can block not only grade levels, but you can also block specific websites and specific ratings. And so it's a beautiful thing. And then on there, if you have to give them cell phones, at some point, every kid will need one. Guardian is a good one. You can go through and you can actually put that on your kids' phones. You can monitor them, make sure they're safe, and people are not trying to scout your children out for things that are inappropriate.
And being the youngest one here, which y'all are still pretty good so far. Saying.
Wow.
But being the youngest one here, please just be honest with your kids. Explain why you're doing something like this. Like, explain why you want to shelter them from these types of things.
Yeah.
It's not do as I say, not as I do. It's not because it's my way. It's explain to them why this is the way that you're doing it. And that way they can appreciate what you are doing. Yeah,
and if they don't appreciate it in the moment, speaking as, you know, somebody who was a kid and has grown up, you know, and like I looking back at my childhood now, I'm just like, you know what? I there are times my parents did stuff and had rules and regulations and stuff, and I was like, this is stupid. This is dumb. Why are you doing it? But like now I look back and I'm like, thank you. Yeah. I understand. I'm an adult now. I see stuff. I know stuff.
Yeah.
You kept that from me and kept me from going into situations and stuff that could have really hurt me or somebody else. So.
But to the show's profit, or however you want to say it, Kristen also mentioned earworm, which is just so important. Like the things that kids can pick up on the internet and just gets ingrained in them. I mean, I think I've said my first cuss word at like age 12, and it's because I heard from a friend at school who heard it online. And it's like, I never would have heard that unless a friend said it, who he wouldn't have heard it if he didn't hear it online. It's like all these things just get ingrained in your head.
Yeah.
And then it just gets stuck there and you just want to repeat it. That's why we're so important to catch what you're saying in front of young minds.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep. I've had to learn it the hard way, even somewhat pretty recently, in terms of, how cognitive I am of what they're on. One of mine, I won't say which one for embarrassing, but he was telling me,
I know which one it is.
He was making a joke. He's like, "Oh, Dad," he's like, so and so made this video thing, and he was reading one of the comments about it, and it just got stuck in his mind after he read it. Had no idea what he was reading until he just kept spouting it out and kept spouting it out. He was like, "Oh yeah, that joke is as flat as a maxi pad."
Oh,
and I about choked on what I was drinking. I'm like, "Wait, what? What did you just say?" I'm like, "Do you even know what that is?" He's like, "Actually, no. I saw it on a comment," and I'm like, "Well, to your point, Sam, I'm like, this is why you can't say that, because this, and that, and no more reading comments."
right.
Yeah.
And so even on kids stuff that's specific for kids, I mean, you just can't stop everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. To my kids' credit, so one of my older kids, I have a couple older kids, a couple younger kids. To their credit, one of them was over, and they said to one of my younger ones, they said, "Whatever you do, listen to him." He pointed at me. He said, "Listen to him." I didn't listen to him. I regret it now. Listen to him. So kids, even later, when they make mistakes,
Yeah.
if they're honest with themselves, come back later, been like, "You know what?" And I had to tell him. I said, "You know what? That doesn't come from me. That comes because I didn't listen to my grandfather. And my grandfather told me what I should do. I didn't listen to him. And so I learned the hard way. And so that's why I try to tell you. I tried to keep you from my mistakes because I didn't listen to him."
Yeah.
So.
And to that credit, I mean, every single person, I think, needs to learn the same mistake. We can't shelter our kids to not make the mistake that we did.
Yeah.
But we do need to explain to our kids how we made that mistake and why it was important to learn from that mistake.
Yeah.
Not necessarily to avoid that altogether, because that's just sheltering and hiding a truth of the world, a reality that most likely they will make and they need to learn from as soon as they can, instead of just saying you're in a safe little bubble.
Yeah. I think that's where in my previous Protestant life, I think I missed the fact that a lot of the lives of the saints teach us those things. Like, for example, if you go back and look at like St. Augustine, right? And a lot of the Protestant side demonizes St. Augustine, even though everything they have is based on him.
Not me.
I mean, the entire Western Church is St. Augustine. Whether you like it or not,
Shots fired.
it's all St. Augustine. Anyway.
Not me. He's my favorite wiggle.
But if you go back in his younger life, he did live a somewhat secular life, had an illegitimate child, et cetera, et cetera. And he spent the rest of his life trying to correct people on his own mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And that's why if you read St. Augustine's Confessions, even to this day, 2000, almost 1,600 years later, it still resonates with you because it's still so real. It's still so vibrant, right? Because we still make those same mistakes, and he relates that to us.
Yeah. Yep. Well, go back to the show. I think that's why it's particularly tough with her and all the kids. I mean, it's just her.
For a lot.
So, like what you were saying, Sam, once the father returned back, it's like, I mean, it's tough enough with 4 kids or 3 kids or 2 kids or whatever, but when you got just 4 girls.
Yeah. Yeah. I have 3.
Yeah.
Hey, Gubby, I think you have. Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It takes a village. It takes.
It does. It does.
It does.
Well, Gumby, you're not supposed to make the village on your own.
Yeah. That's it. We'll save that for another episode.
We'll devote a whole episode to Gumby and his children.
That'll take up the rest of 2022, man.
So there were several more interesting episodes that played forward. One of them was actually book 27. LaRue takes advantage of his freedom by harassing Kristen. Now, if you remember, LaRue was the serial killer from episode 1 that she was trying to imprison, right? So by Townsend formally proposes to Cheryl, her grandmother, all right, Kristen's grandmother.
Mother.
Well, I'm sorry, mother. Her children's grandmother. Yes, sorry. I'm thinking of them in their bunk beds calling her grandma, right?
It's a village.
Yeah. When she goes to ask for Kristen's blessing, her daughter forbids her from coming to her family again. Dr. Boggs refers one of his patients, Eleanor, to David, as Eleanor believes that her unborn son is a demon. I'm sure he has a regular name like George or Howard. After the boy's twin sister mysteriously dies in utero, David arranges an exorcism, but Eleanor's baby is born before it can be completed. He and Ben look into RSM Fertility, the clinic that administered Eleanor's IVF, and discovers links to families they previously worked with. David proposes a theory. The clinic is secretly a front for the hierarchy. Now, by hierarchy, they're referring to the different sigils and the people in power who use the sigils, the demon sigils, to remain in power over not just the city, but the whole, communities, companies, organizations. So this is huge. It's multinational. So
that was such an interesting episode. A bit odd.
Right?
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is at the end. Kristen, she ends up doing something that may come back to haunt her. So this time of Kristen walking towards a demon, Kristen gets a call that LaRue was found bludgeoned to death in his home.
Whoa.
She then burns her hand, picking up a crucifix, suggesting evil is within her.
It's the biggest spoiler of the night, man.
So what's really interesting about this episode is what they don't say right here is that when they are at going to RSM Fertility to do an investigation, Ben walks inside the room and says, "Oh, hey, you have blood on your leg." And she reaches down, wipes it off, and she says, "No, I don't."
What blood?
Uh-huh. And so Ben kind of knows something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And by her behavior, even David is kind of noticing that she's a little bit off.
Yeah.
And Ben connects the dots pretty quickly.
Yes, he does. And then it really seals the deal when she picks up the crucifix and finds out it burns her.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes you wonder if possession is coming to her, maybe even an advanced, what we call infestation, through her just doing little acts of evil throughout the whole first season.
Corrupting herself.
Yes.
Or being corrupted.
Yeah, because if you notice, she does one thing after another, and each little thing is kind of corrupting her nature all throughout the first episode, leading up to where she finally murders LaRue, spoiler alert, by sticking her climbing axe right into the back of his skull. Now, they don't show that in
little basic instinct
season 1, but they do infer that she did do it.
Now, I will
protection for her family.
I will say this
Yes.
of the show. I do not like how they did that. Mainly because the way they portrayed her afterwards, she had zero remorse. She had her acting ability or her acting about it did not show any sort of
Remorse.
any remorse, any sort of psychological change.
Yes. But there's a reason for that isn't exposed to season 2. And so
Not saying anything about that.
there is a reason for that. So
Yeah.
it was actually very well played, and it distinctly, you see a flavor of it right there at the end.
You'll also notice that after that episode, George doesn't show up.
It's true.
Oh,
Because George doesn't have to show up.
Didn't even pick up on that. Wow.
George no longer has to haunt her.
Who's George?
Hello, he has a regular name, which means he's a demon.
Yep. That's a good point, Sam. Wow. I didn't even connect that one.
But I do want to say this. I'm not sure if Mira showed up before this episode. No, I'm pretty sure she did.
That's
Yeah.
her friend,
So-
the cop friend.
Yes.
And she shows up only briefly before that, but then, yes, she shows up right after this.
So Mira Bird is a police investigator. She is one of Kristen's best friends, I think.
Yep.
But I think the show was actually trying to show her not as her best friend, but as her conscience. And that's why, right?
Yeah. Because she...
For those not
You're right.
actually watching this, Gumby just shook his head in disbelief and shock, like, whoa, I didn't even see that coming.
Yeah.
But I say that Mira is her conscience, or the allegory to being her conscience, because during every single episode after that, when they're talking, it's always with the train in the background, as in some type of interference, some type of drowning out of her own conscience. And I can't talk about this because it's season 2.
Don't touch.
How much alcohol is in this thing?
But there is a part that just shows exactly why I'm saying what I'm saying.
Yep.
So
Yes,
as
you
soon as
are.
we go through season 2, I'll explain that.
Yeah. Well,
Interesting.
and there's, yeah. So,
So you have a lot to look forward to, Ed.
Yeah,
Yes.
it'll be interesting
Season
going back after
2's
this whole conversation and watching all this and like
Yeah.
after some of these ideas, like I'll have a better, because I'm not even sure I would have picked on something like that. So that'd be interesting going back and watching it and seeing how their interactions and stuff and seeing,
I don't think the writers who wrote it would pick it. They're going to be like, yeah, that is what I meant.
that's what we were doing. Hey, put that in the notes. We're doing it from now on.
well, what he says is actually true because there's a scene.
In season 2.
There's a scene in season 2 that actually plays to exactly what he's saying.
Well, I can't say this to that because I do remember her cop friend implying at a certain part where, like, I've known.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you're catching up.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. There's so much coming in season 2.
Yeah.
But again, we'll cover that in a future upcoming episode.
Yep.
So it's going to be a lot of fun. That will also be a huge spoiler episode. So watch season 1, then listen to this, then watch season 2, and then watch that next episode.
We've spoiled it.
Or listen
It's been
to
evil.
it. Or listen to it.
How about this? We won't spoil season 3.
All right. Okay.
There you go.
That's a fair deal.
Oh, just wait till you get me on the topic of her therapist, though.
Oh, again. That's all right.
That was good, yeah.
All right. Got me final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I love the I love the tension between the secular and the religious and trying to bridge the two and that overlap and all of that. I love that duality piece. That to me is really cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sam?
glad we touched on it.
Everything is religion to somebody. So for Ben, science was religion. It was everything needs to be explained. 2 + 2 does equal 4, and I have the evidence to prove it. With it, when it came to who was it? Kristen and who was? Sorry,
What was that?
who was the pastor? I can't remember his name.
I forget. He was.
David.
That's. Oh, you mean the priest?
Yeah, priest.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
We call them pastors, Aaron.
Well, the thing is that if you have a parish, you are still a pastor, even if you're a priest.
Anyways, so for Ben, science is religion. 2 + 2 = 4. I have science to prove it. For Kristen and David, it's I have faith. I have belief.
Yeah.
David, it's faith. Kristen, it's belief. Kristen uses psychology to explain her belief. It is a soft science. There's no actual hard evidence for what she believes, other than time and time again, things have come up. And it shows why things are explained the way they are. She explained it very well when it came to the DSM-5 and how we're in the 5th rendition of our belief system of why things are the way they are. David, he has his belief system, his faith that things aren't always explainable, but they can be the way they are because of something extra. So each one of them is dealing with this struggle of explaining away and explaining to themselves why things are the way they are.
Right.
Good. I just enjoyed the conversation. It's definitely a very interesting show. And like everybody was saying, it's interesting to see the arguments of, you know, what is natural and what's supernatural. You know, when does one overlap? I do believe in both worlds, and it's interesting to see, like, where is the overlap? Where is the influence of one into the other, and then where is the free will in the physical, in our realm?
Yeah.
You know. So.
Sweet. And I enjoyed the conversation with all of you. Please check us out on every social media platform. And also know that we have our regular podcast, Bible Over Brews. Soon to come up, Bible Over Brews News. Check out our Patreon. We love you. Godspeed.
Good night, everyone.
Peace out.
Adios, amigos.